I was standing at the altar, my dress clinging to me under the lights, my heart racing with nerves and joy. The music swelled, guests leaned forward, and for one breathless moment, I believed I was stepping into the forever I'd always dreamed of. Then, the church doors slammed open. A woman walked in, not just in white, but in the same gown I'd seen once, hidden in the back of Luke's closet. The one he told me was a surprise for me. Only it wasn't, because she was wearing it. And when she screamed, "You promised me this was our wedding!" The fairy tale I thought I was living shattered in front of everyone. My name is Abby. I'm 28, and I've spent most of my life chasing the kind of love people write novels about. I'd been through my share of disappointments, but when Luke walked into my life, it felt like lightning had finally struck. He was bold, charming, magnetic, the kind of man who made you feel chosen just by looking at you. From the beginning, he swept me up in a whirlwind. Morning texts before my alarm, flowers at my office, surprise road trips that felt pulled from a movie. Within 6 months, he was down on one knee on a cliff at sunset, slipping a diamond onto my finger while the sea roared behind us. I said yes with tears streaming down my cheeks, convinced this was it, that every heartbreak had been leading me here. And yet, standing at the altar with cameras flashing and whispers filling the air, I realized the story I thought was mine had never belonged to me at all. Falling for Luke felt less like a choice, and more like gravity. From the start, he made everything seem effortless, like we'd skipped all the awkward stages and landed straight in a love story. On our second date, he showed up with 2 train tickets and a bag packed. "Trust me," he said with that crooked grin. By nightfall, we were drinking wine in a seaside town I'd never been to, watching the waves crash under the stars. He left handwritten notes in my bag, surprised me with flowers at work, showed up at my door with coffee like driving across town just to see me was nothing at all. It was intoxicating. My friends teased me for being love-struck. My mother said she hadn't seen me smile like that in years. Even my dad called him solid. When Luke proposed just 6 months in, it felt inevitable. I was standing on a cliff at sunset, hair whipping in the wind, while he slipped a diamond ring onto my finger. It was the moment I thought every wrong turn had been leading me toward. But even in the glow, shadows lurked. There were nights he vanished with vague excuses about work. Phone calls he took in hushed tones outside. His phone always face down, buzzing quietly as if the screen itself held secrets. And once, while tidying, I found a boutique bag shoved in the back of his closet. Inside was a dress tag, designer, expensive, and nothing like anything I'd ever wear. When I asked, he smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "It was supposed to be a surprise for you?" His tone was so smooth, I almost believed him. Almost. But I pushed the doubts aside. I told myself I was lucky, that he was romantic, that I'd finally found the man who chose me. Because when you want a fairy tale badly enough, even red flags start to look like rose petals. The morning of my wedding felt like a dream. My bridesmaids adjusted my veil. My mother dabbed her eyes, and the photographer caught every smile like it was proof that love still existed. By the time the doors opened and I began my walk down the aisle, my chest was so full I thought it might burst. The church glowed with candlelight. Guests rose to their feet, smiling as my train floated behind me. At the end of the aisle stood Luke. My Luke, eyes glistening, jaw set with pride, the very picture of forever. The minister began, my palms damp against my bouquet. I took a shaky breath, ready to speak the vows I'd whispered to myself 100 times in the mirror. And then the doors slammed open. The church glowed with candlelight. Guests rose to their feet, smiling as my train floated behind me. At the end of the aisle stood Luke. My Luke, eyes glistening, jaw set with pride, the very picture of forever. The minister began, my palms damp against my bouquet. I took a shaky breath, ready to speak the vows I'd whispered to myself 100 times in the mirror. And then the doors slammed open. A woman strode in, head high, her heels striking against the marble floor like gunshots. Gasps rippled through the church. She wasn't just wearing white, she was wearing a wedding gown. Lace shimmered under the chandeliers, the same cut, the same style I'd seen on the boutique tag I once found hidden in Luke's closet. The surprise, he said, was for me. My stomach dropped. She clutched a bag to her chest, her voice shaking with fury as she screamed, "You promised me this was our wedding!" My bouquet slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. The entire church froze, all eyes snapping from her to me, then to Luke. He stood rigid, color draining from his face, jaw clenched tight. He didn't deny it. He didn't move. He just stared, pale and cornered. The woman marched forward and pulled out proof. First, a stack of printed texts, her hand trembling as she held them up. "Here's what he tells me at night. How I'm the one. How today was supposed to be mine." Gasps rose. My aunt covered her mouth. A bridesmaid whispered, "Oh my God." Then came the photos. Her phone screen thrust toward the front rows. Luke in his car with her. Luke at dinners I never knew about. Luke smiling with his arm draped around her. And finally, the cruelest cut. She pulled a ring from her pocket, a diamond smaller than mine, but unmistakably an engagement ring. "He promised me forever," she shouted, tears streaking her face. "And then he left me for her." My vision blurred. The walls seemed to tilt, the church spinning like a carousel I couldn't get off. Luke finally stepped forward, hands raised. "She's lying. She's obsessed with me, stalking me. Abby, baby, don't believe her. She's crazy." But his words fell flat. Because if she was crazy, why were there texts? Why were there photos? Why was she wearing a gown I knew he had bought? The whispers around me grew louder, a storm I couldn't escape. My chest tightened, air thinning. And in that moment, I understood the truth I had been too afraid to name. She wasn't just a fling. She thought she was the bride, which meant the man standing at the altar, the one I called my forever, had been promising it to someone else all along. I stumbled into a side room off the church, my dress tangling around my legs, my chest heaving like I'd run a marathon in lace. The walls closed in, suffocating. For a moment, I pressed my back against the wood paneling, praying it would swallow me whole. Then the door creaked open. "Abby," Luke's voice cracked. He shut the door and dropped to his knees in front of me, his hands reaching for mine. I pulled back. "Don't touch me." My voice was low, jagged. "Please, just listen." His eyes were wild, his charm gone. "Yes, I knew her. Yes, we were involved. But it's over. It ended before I met you." I laughed, bitter and hollow. "Over? She just walked into our wedding in a dress you bought her. That doesn't sound over, Luke. That sounds like you living two lives." He shook his head furiously, words tumbling out. "She's unstable. I tried to break it off, but she wouldn't let go. You're the one I chose, Abby. You, not her." Chosen. The words sliced through me like glass. If I was the one he chose, what had she been? A placeholder? A warm-up? Before I could speak, her voice thundered from the hallway. "Tell her the truth, Luke. Tell her you got me pregnant and promised to raise this baby with me." The air snapped out of my lungs. My eyes shot to Luke's face, searching for denial, outrage, anything. But he just stared at the floor, silent. And silence was the only confession I needed. Pregnant. Not just another woman. Another life. Another family. I shoved him away, his hands clawing at the air as I pulled myself upright, skirt scraping the floor. His voice chased me, pleading, promising, but I couldn't hear it anymore. Because in that instant, the truth was final. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had already built a future I was never meant to be part of. I fled back into the corridor, my dress snagging on the doorframe, tears blurring the chaos behind me. The church wasn't filled with music anymore. It was a storm of whispers, scraping chairs, and buzzing phones. The side chick fought against ushers dragging her out, her veil askew, her voice echoing through the sanctuary. "He'll come back to me. He always does." Her words trailed me like poison. I caught my reflection in a side mirror. Mascara streaked, lipstick smudged, gown twisted into a costume of humiliation. I didn't look like a bride. I looked like a woman gutted alive in front of an audience. And the worst part? My mind replayed every red flag I had buried. The late-night calls he took outside, the boutique bag in his closet, the excuses about work trips, the way he tightened his arms around me whenever I asked too many questions. I had seen the truth 100 times. I had just chosen not to see it. In the days after, grief twisted into obsession. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't stop digging. His phone records revealed late-night numbers, Cloud backups exposed deleted texts, credit card bills showed boutique charges, hotels I'd never been to, dinners I'd never eaten. And then came the sickest discovery. It wasn't just her. There were several. Different names, different faces, threaded across his life like a spider's web. Some women I didn't recognize, others I did. One had even clinked glasses with me at dinner, smiling across the table while sleeping with the man I thought I'd marry. The betrayal spread wider than Luke. Pieces of the truth had leaked to people around me. Friends, cousins, even a bridesmaid. One admitted she'd seen him with someone else but convinced herself it wasn't serious. Another confessed he'd heard rumors but didn't want to ruin the wedding. So while I was busy planning a marriage, the people closest to me watched me walk blindfolded into disaster. The wedding hadn't been the explosion. It was just the final detonation of lies that had been burning for years. Luke wasn't a man in love. He was a con artist in a suit, spreading promises like currency, juggling women like secrets, until the day the whole performance collapsed. And me, I wasn't his bride. I was collateral damage in a game I never knew I was playing. The weeks after the wedding blurred into a haze of whispers and pity. Vendors sent polite emails, the church refunded what it could, and neighbors stared when I walked down the street. Even at the grocery store, I felt their eyes on me. The bride who'd been left at the altar in a storm of lies. The humiliation was sharp at first, but over time, it dulled into something clearer, a determination not to let Luke's betrayal be the only story told about me. I started with the symbols. I boxed up the dress, every sequin now poisoned with shame, and shoved it into the attic. The playlist we'd made for the reception, deleted. The favors and hashtags meant for Instagram, gone. One night, I stood in front of the mirror, mascara still running down my cheeks, and whispered to myself, he doesn't get to define me. Therapy helped, not just to process the betrayal, but to understand why I'd ignored my instincts. Journals filled with rage softened into clarity. Friends who stayed reminded me I was more than the scandal. And slowly, I began to believe them. Because the truth was, Luke hadn't just cheated me out of a wedding. He cheated me out of the future I thought we were building. She wore the dress he bought her, but I wore the shame he stitched into me. But shame only lingers if you let it. And day by day, I decided to let it go. I see now that Luke was never promising forever to me. He was promising it to himself, staring into the mirror, in love with the reflection of a man who could charm anyone into believing him. Sometimes the person at the altar isn't vowing forever to you at all. They're just vowing it to their own reflection. And me? I walked away. Not as a wife, not as a victim, but as someone who finally understood that I hadn't lost love that day. I lost a lie. And losing a lie is its own kind of freedom.